Hi, my name is Paige Cappell, and this is my Unit 1 reflection. So I'd like to start with this reflection by saying that this was a brand new experience for me. I'm a finance major, and I've never, yes, if we acknowledge that as humans we are all performers and we're performing every day, then yes, I do perform every day, but I've never performed theatrically. I've performed aesthetic text, with jokes or storytelling or things like that, but I've never performed a piece really of like text or anything like on a very big scale. So this was brand new for me. In chapter 4, page 53 in Peleus and Schaefer's textbook, it says that the chapter acknowledges that we all have stories to tell, and I think that this Unit 1, really exemplified that, because as humans, we all have stories and we all have experiences, and I think it's interesting, even though we were given prompts, I'm sure that a lot of stories and personal experiences that we have could fit the different prompts, but it was interesting to see what each person chose for the prompt and what story that they chose. And even for me, I had a lot of things that I had to choose from, and I think it's interesting if I really wanted to analyze why I chose certain stories and whatnot. So also on page 53, it talks about how stories can define relationships, stories can define relationships, and I chose Brandon's Dumbass Award story, but he also had another story, I forget the title, but essentially the story helped him stand up to his brother for the first time, and he said that ever since then the relationship has been different because Brandon is the younger brother, or the youngest brother, and he was standing up to his older brother, and he said ever since then he is seen as more of an equal to his older brother, and he isn't just this little brother because he stood up for himself. And I think it's interesting that he wanted to tell that story because that story specifically defined a personal relationship with him. On page 54 in the Peleus and Schaefer textbook, chapter 4, the authors discuss how stories and artifacts, how stories are artifacts that are valuable to our life, and I totally agree with that. I think that choosing what stories you want to tell and stories that happen to us have meanings to us, and they're not always good meanings. They could symbolize something bad that happened to in our life. They can symbolize a change in our life. They could symbolize something good. I think this unit and seeing everyone's different stories showed me just how valuable a story can be to someone, because there were things that just seemed so like insignificant when I was like reading or watching everyone else's story or videos, and they might seem insignificant like if you just saw it on paper, like why would someone want to talk about this? But I think it's interesting to see that something that seems so insignificant to me because I didn't experience it has a big impact on someone else's life, and they want to share it with other people. And this goes back to empathy and radical empathy that we talked about in lecture, because that, like, now I have that in my mind to see, like, okay, just because something seems insignificant to me, or I don't know why they'd want to talk about it, if I think about it and I put them in, or I put myself in their shoes truly, and I start to emulate them and practice their movements, I can see like, oh, like I understand why this is important. It was an important childhood experience. It was something that happened later on in their life that changed their relationship. I think it's really interesting, and I did that with Brandon. He's talking about a dumbass award, and it's like, oh, funny childhood memory, but as I became Brandon and I tried my best to be Brandon, I started to think like, okay, like this is, like I could see how this is like a fun childhood memory that has resonated with him and stuck with him his entire life. This is a little small point that I wanted to talk about on page 51 in chapter 4 in the Peleus and Schaefer textbook. the authors discuss wording and vocabulary and word choice and whatnot, and it was definitely a big thing for me, trying to be Brandon, to say the words exactly how he said it and use the words he says specifically, because there were times I would find myself being like, why doesn't he just say this word? Like, that's what I would say. Or like I would just subconsciously say, like, shove a word in there or do something or change a phrase to how I would say the phrase. And it gets me thinking of, we all have different vocabularies and we all say different things, and yes, we can get the same meaning across, but it's all just a little bit different because we're all different and we're all unique and we all have different experiences. So, for the question, what was it like to fully embody Brandon, and what did I learn about them? To fully embody Brandon, it was very interesting and a lot of fun for me, because first off, me and Brandon are very physically different. He is a very large dude, and he's kind of seemingly like a jock, I would say. But as I watched his videos and I started to become him and I talked with him in class, I found that he really is much more than that. When you look at Brandon, I think that you probably, or at least, I don't know, I kind of thought that he was just like a dude that was just in the class, like, just to get the credit, and I'm Brandon, whatever. And he's so much more than that, and I think if we just throw the stereotypes out of the way and not look at someone's physical appearance, and when you get to learn their stories and empathize with them, you get to see who they truly are. And I think that Brandon is a lot more like chill and open and thoughtful than what you might assume, because at least that's what I learned about him. To see myself performed by someone else, it was very weird, and at first I was like, this is how people perceive me? Like, no, like, this can't be it. But then I was like, okay, no, this isn't how he perceives me. This is just him trying to be me. So that's why I think that they're, you know, especially because we're not professional performers in everyday life performances, why there's a little bit of a disparity between me actually and what Brandon performed of me. But I think that Brandon, even though there was disparity, I think I could tell that Brandon tried really hard to relay my story and try to be me as much as possible, and I really appreciated that, and that shows respect to my story and to me, and I appreciate that a lot, and I can see that he really tried. Some things I learned about myself are that I talk with my hands a lot. Whenever Dr. Vaughn was discussing having to write the transcripts and how that needed to be physical movements, I was like, oh my God, Brandon is gonna have the worst time ever trying to describe all my hand movements and everything, but so I kind of want to tone down on hand movements, so I should just go like this. Something I also learned, I talked about this a little bit, is that stereotyping someone, whether it's not super like stereotyping is never good. Like, you know, I saw Brandon, I was just kind of like, okay, like, I don't know how much substance he has to him, like, I don't know, I know that's not nice, but it's just things that you think, like, right away. But I learned that, you know, he's a much different person than what I thought he was, and I got to know him more throughout this unit and throughout the video, and I'm kind of taking away that you shouldn't just judge a book by its cover, obviously, but just, like, even if sometimes things have proven to be true, like, have I met big, tall dudes that only cared about football and, like, girls? Yes, but I shouldn't apply that to everyone, and I'm so grateful that Brandon taught me to kind of look past that, because now I can, like, look at people and think, you know, just because, like, he wears, like, Chargers football stuff and, like, you know, acts a certain way, that doesn't mean that's all he is. And I think that people could stereotype me and be like, okay, well, she's just a little girl in a dress, like she's probably not that smart, or she only cares about boys, or she only cares about getting her nails done. I'm sure people think that about me, and I wouldn't want people to think that about me because I'm so much more than that. And I think that I can apply what I learned about Brandon and how I was able to empathize with him, and I can apply that to everyone that I come across. So yes, that was my Unit 1 reflection.